She was forced to marry a cruel billionaireceo, even as a virgin. After his first night with her, he won't stop. I know exactly who you are, Isolde Winters. Ashton Thorne's voice cut through the elegant office like ice, his steel gray eyes never leaving her face as he circled his massive desk. The dutiful daughter, sacrificing herself to save her family from ruin. Isolde lifted her chin despite the trembling in her hands. And I know who you are. The man who systematically destroyed my family's company out of nothing but spite and cruelty. A cold smile touched his lips as he moved closer, towering over her. Then we understand each other perfectly. You will marry me, share my name, my home, and my bed. In return, your family's debts will be erased. And if I refuse, she whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. Ashton leaned down, his breath warm against her ear. Then I will take everything. Your family home, your siblings' education funds, every last penny. Your father started this war, Isolde. I'm simply finishing it. Her eyes flashed with defiance even as tears threatened. My father may deserve your vengeance, but we don't. Perhaps not, he agreed, his finger tracing her jawline in a touch that was barely there. But sometimes innocents become casualties of war. The choice is yours. Marry me, or watch your family crumble completely. Isolde closed her eyes, the weight of an impossible decision crushing down on her shoulders. When she opened them again, determination had replaced fear. I'll marry you, Ashton Thorne. But remember this, you may own my name after tomorrow, but you will never own my heart. His smile was victorious, yet somehow hollow. I don't want your heart, Isolde. I just want your father to suffer knowing his daughter belongs to me. If you've ever wondered how far you would go to protect the people you love, or whether hatred can truly transform into something else entirely, stay with me. This story of sacrifice and unexpected redemption will show you that even the cruelest intentions can sometimes lead to the most profound second chances. Isolde Winters stood at the window of her childhood bedroom, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass like the tears she refused to shed. At 24, she had imagined many possible futures for herself, finishing her MBA, revitalizing her family's struggling shipping company, perhaps even falling in love someday. Never had she imagined becoming the bride of Ashton Thorne, the ruthless tech billionaire whose vendetta against her family had brought them to financial ruin. The elegant white gown hanging on her closet door seemed to mock her with its beauty, a costume for the charade she would perform tomorrow. Her wedding day, not a celebration of love, but the final move in a chess game she hadn't even known she was playing. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Isolde, her younger sister Myra's voice was hesitant. Can I come in? Of course, Isolde replied, forcing warmth into her voice as she turned from the window. Mira entered, her 17-year-old face creased with worry. I overheard Dad on the phone. Is it true? Are you really marrying Ashton Thorne tomorrow? Isolde took a deep breath. She had hoped to explain things more gently to her siblings. Yes, it's true. But why? Myra's voice cracked. Everyone knows he's horrible, cold, ruthless. They call him the machine on Wall Street because he has no heart. And he's been trying to destroy Dad's company for years. That's exactly why, Isolde said quietly, leading her sister to sit beside her on the bed. Wintercrest Shipping is failing, Mira. The company, our home, your college fund, Liam's medical treatments. We're about to lose everything. I don't understand what that has to do with you marrying him, Mira insisted. Isolde chose her words carefully. Ashton has offered a solution. If I marry him, he'll clear the company's debts and ensure the family's financial security. Myra's eyes widened in horror. He's buying you? Like some sort of business acquisition. She jumped to her feet. That's insane. You can't do this, Issy. We'll figure something else out. There is nothing else, Isolde said firmly, the words she'd repeated to herself countless times over the 3 days since Ashton had made his proposition. Dad has tried everything. The banks won't extend any more credit. Investors have pulled out. This is the only way to save the company and make sure you and Liam are taken care of. But you don't love him. You don't even know him. Mira protested. A bitter smile touched Isolde's lips. Love is a luxury we can't afford right now. Does he love you? Mira asked hesitantly. The question was so naive, so far from reality that Isolde nearly laughed. No, Mira. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. Then why? Why would he want to marry you if not for love? Isolde hesitated. How could she explain the calculating hatred she had seen in Ashton Thorne's eyes? The cold satisfaction as he laid out his terms? It's complicated. There's history between his family and ours. This is his way of resolving it. The half-truth tasted sour on her tongue. What Ashton truly wanted was revenge. 15 years ago, her father's negligence had allegedly led to a catastrophic accident at one of their shipping facilities. Among the casualties had been Ashton's younger sister, just 16 at the time. Though investigations had cleared Wintercrest Shipping of legal responsibility, Ashton had spent years meticulously working toward this moment, complete control over the Winters family's fate. "I won't let you do this," Mira declared. "I'll talk to Dad. There must be another way." Isolde caught her sister's hand. "Mira, listen to me. The decision is made. Tomorrow I will marry Ashton Thorne, and you will smile and pretend to be happy for me. For Dad's sake, for Liam's sake. Do you understand?" Tears welled in Myra's eyes as she nodded reluctantly. "I understand. But I hate it, Issy. I hate him for doing this to you." "I know," Isolde whispered, pulling her sister into a hug. "But sometimes we have to make difficult choices for the people we love." After Mira left, Isolde returned to the window, her composed facade crumbling as she pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Ashton Thorne, and the thought filled her with equal parts dread and determination. Whatever his intentions, whatever cruelty he had planned, she would endure it. For her family, she would endure anything. If you've ever had to sacrifice your own happiness for someone you love, hit that like button. Sometimes the most difficult choices reveal strengths we never knew we possessed. The wedding ceremony at St. Bartholomew's Church was as cold and impersonal as the groom himself. No friends had been invited, only immediate family and essential business associates, witnesses to the merger rather than celebrants of a union. Isolde walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her ivory gown a masterpiece of understated elegance that belied the circumstances of its wearing. Her father's hand trembled against hers, his once proud face now haggard with guilt and defeat. "I'm so sorry, Isolde," he whispered as they approached the altar where Ashton waited, resplendent in a custom black suit that emphasized his imposing height and the breadth of his shoulders. "This is all my fault." "It's going to be all right, Dad," she assured him, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. At the altar, Ashton's expression remained impassive as he took her hand from her father's. Up close, she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, the only hint of color in his otherwise monochromatic appearance. Black hair, pale skin, gray eyes, black suit. Like a predator dressed for a funeral. The ceremony passed in a blur of traditional vows that felt like lies on her tongue. When the moment came for Ashton to kiss his bride, his lips brushed hers in the briefest, most impersonal contact possible, a contractual seal rather than a gesture of affection. The small reception afterward was equally austere, held in a private dining room at the Thorne Industries headquarters rather than a celebration venue. Isolde moved through it like a ghost, accepting congratulations with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Across the room, she caught glimpses of Ashton moving among his business associates, his demeanor relaxed and confident, as though he hadn't just shackled himself to a woman he despised for the sake of a decades-old vendetta. "He seems pleased with himself," came a voice at her elbow. Isolde turned to find a striking woman in her 40s observing her with calculating eyes. "I'm Regina Voss, Ashton's CFO." "It's nice to meet you," Isolde replied automatically, years of social training kicking in despite her inner turmoil. "Is it?" Regina's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. "I wonder. You're not what I expected as Ashton's choice of bride." "And what did you expect?" Isolde asked, unable to keep a hint of defiance from her tone. Regina smiled, though the expression held no warmth. "Someone more compatible with his world. Someone who understands the game." "I'm not playing a game, Ms. Voss. Everyone in Ashton's orbit is playing a game, Mrs. Thorne. The sooner you understand that, the better your chances of survival." Regina's gaze shifted to where Ashton stood conversing with a group of investors. "He's brilliant, ruthless, and utterly focused on his goals. Don't mistake this marriage for anything other than a strategic move." "I'm fully aware of what this marriage is," Isolde replied coldly. Regina studied her with newfound interest. "Perhaps you are. Still, a word of advice. Ashton Thorne collects weaknesses like some men collect art. Don't give him yours. Before Isolde could respond, Ashton appeared at her side, his hand settling possessively at the small of her back. "Regina, I see you've met my wife." "Indeed. We were just getting acquainted," Regina replied smoothly. "Congratulations again. If you'll excuse me, I should check on our Japanese investors." As Regina departed, Ashton's fingers pressed slightly harder against Isolde's spine. "It's time for us to leave." Isolde's pulse quickened, the reality of what would come next suddenly overwhelming. The wedding night. She had been so focused on getting through the ceremony and reception that she'd pushed thoughts of the evening ahead from her mind. "Now?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Something flickered in Ashton's eyes, awareness of her fear, perhaps even satisfaction at it. "Unless you'd prefer to prolong this charade?" Isolde squared her shoulders. "No. Let's go." They made perfunctory farewells, Isolde embracing her tearful sister and brother with promises to visit soon, avoiding her father's devastated gaze. Then Ashton was guiding her to the waiting limousine, his touch impersonal, yet somehow branding her through the delicate fabric of her gown. The ride to Ashton's penthouse passed in tense silence. Isolde watched the city lights blur past, each one bringing her closer to a fate she had accepted but dreaded. At her side, Ashton worked on his phone, seemingly unbothered by the weight of the moment. "You could at least pretend this is a normal wedding night," she finally said, the silence becoming unbearable. Ashton glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Would you prefer I lie to you, Isolde? Pretend this is a love match rather than what it truly is." "And what is it truly?" she challenged, though she knew the answer. "The culmination of a promise I made 15 years ago, standing over my sister's grave." His voice was devoid of emotion, as though discussing a business transaction rather than a vendetta that had consumed a third of his life. "Your father took everything from me. Now I have everything that matters to him." The brutal honesty stole her breath. "Including me. Especially you." The corner of his mouth lifted in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "His precious daughter, the one he protected while my sister died. There's a certain poetry to it, don't you think?" Isolde turned away, unwilling to let him see how deeply his words cut. "I was a child when your sister died. We all were. I had nothing to do with that accident." "Perhaps not directly," Ashton conceded. "But you benefited from your father's negligence. The corners he cut to maximize profits paid for your private education, your comfortable lifestyle. Blood money, Isolde, whether you knew it or not." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Was he right? Had her childhood comforts been purchased with the suffering of others? With his sister's life? The thought made her stomach turn. Before she could formulate a response, the limousine slowed to a stop outside an elegant high-rise in the heart of Manhattan. "We've arrived," Ashton announced unnecessarily, already reaching for the door. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of the building, a monument to modern luxury and sophisticated taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the city, while minimalist furnishings in shades of gray, black, and white created an atmosphere of cool elegance. Like its owner, the space was impressive but unwelcoming, designed to intimidate rather than comfort. "Your things have been moved into the master suite," Ashton informed her, loosening his tie as he strode toward a sweeping staircase. "I had the closet reorganized to accommodate your wardrobe, though you'll find I've taken the liberty of supplementing it. Your previous clothing seemed inadequate for your new position." Isolde followed him up the stairs, irritation temporarily overriding her anxiety. "My position? As what exactly?" "Your revenge trophy." Ashton paused at the top of the stairs, turning to regard her with cold amusement. "As my wife, Isolde. You are now Mrs. Ashton Thorne, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails." "And what responsibilities would those be?" she asked, a defiant tilt to her chin despite the fear coursing through her veins. In 2 fluid steps, he closed the distance between them, one hand capturing her wrist while the other cupped her face with surprising gentleness. "You're an intelligent woman. I'm sure you can figure it out." His proximity was overwhelming, the subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body, the intensity of his gaze as it dropped to her lips. For one disorienting moment, Isolde found herself responding to him on a purely physical level, her body betraying her with an unwelcome flicker of attraction. Ashton noticed, his eyes darkening as his thumb brushed across her lower lip. "Interesting," he murmured. Perhaps this arrangement won't be entirely unpleasant for either of us. The suggestion that she might find pleasure in a union based on revenge and coercion snapped Isolde back to reality. She jerked away from his touch. Don't flatter yourself. This may be a legal marriage, but it will never be real. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Be careful what lines you draw, Isolde. You agreed to be my wife in every sense of the word. Or have you forgotten our terms already? I haven't forgotten anything, she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'm simply making it clear that while you may have bought my presence, you haven't bought my desire. That, at least, remains my own. For a long moment, Ashton studied her, his expression inscrutable. Then, without warning, he stepped back. The master suite is through those doors, he said, gesturing to a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. You'll find everything you need inside. I have work to finish. I'll join you later. With that, he turned and descended the stairs, leaving Isolde alone and confused. This was not how she had expected the evening to unfold. Relief mingled with a strange sense of anticlimax as she made her way to the bedroom doors. The master suite was as impressive as the rest of the penthouse, spacious and luxurious, dominated by an enormous bed draped in charcoal gray linens. A door to one side led to a walk-in closet larger than her entire bedroom at home, filled with designer clothes still bearing tags, organized by color and occasion. Another door opened into a bathroom of gleaming marble and glass, a deep soaking tub positioned to take advantage of the city views. On the bed lay a box wrapped in silver paper, a small card bearing her name. Isolde approached it warily, as though it might contain something venomous. Inside she found a nightgown of ivory silk and lace, obviously expensive, undeniably beautiful, and far more revealing than anything she would have chosen for herself. A message, then, a reminder of what he expected, what she had agreed to. Isolde set the box aside, her hands trembling slightly as she began to remove the pins from her hair, letting the dark waves fall around her shoulders. Her wedding dress followed, carefully hung in the expansive closet before she stepped into the bathroom to wash away the remnants of makeup and the stress of the day. The hot water helped calm her nerves, but as the minutes ticked by and Ashton did not appear, her anxiety began to rise again. How long would he make her wait? Was this part of his strategy, keeping her on edge, anticipating the moment when he would claim what he believed was his right? Eventually, wrapped in a plush robe she'd found hanging in the bathroom, Isolde emerged to find the bedroom still empty. The clock on the nightstand showed it was past midnight. 3 hours since he'd left her at the top of the stairs with the promise, or threat, to join her later. Curiosity and frustration finally overcame caution. She ventured out of the master suite and down the hallway, following the soft glow of light coming from a partially open door. Ashton's home office, she discovered, pausing at the threshold. He sat behind a massive desk, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms as his fingers moved across his keyboard. The harsh light of the computer screen accentuated the sharp planes of his face, the slight furrow between his brows as he concentrated. For a moment, he looked almost human, a man absorbed in work rather than the calculating monster who had orchestrated her family's downfall. "Are you going to stand there all night, or did you need something?" he asked without looking up, shattering the illusion. Isolde stepped into the office, tightening the belt of her robe. "I was wondering if you'd forgotten about me." Now he did look up, his gaze traveling over her with deliberate slowness. "That would be impossible, Isolde." Something in his tone made her skin prickle with awareness. "Then why? Why am I working instead of claiming my marital rights?" he finished for her, his expression unreadable. "Is that what you're asking? Are you eager for me to fulfill that particular term of our agreement?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "Of course not. You just what?" Ashton rose from his chair, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "Expected me to drag you to bed the moment we were alone? Force myself on an unwilling bride?" He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "What kind of monster do you think I am, Isolde?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. What kind of monster orchestrates the financial ruin of an entire family for revenge? What kind of monster forces a woman to marry him against her will? "I don't know what to think," she admitted finally. "Your actions and your words don't align." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. An astute observation. Perhaps you're more perceptive than I gave you credit for. Why did you marry me, Ashton? Really? Isolde pressed, seizing the moment of apparent candor. There must have been simpler ways to exact your revenge. Simple, yes. Satisfying, no. He reached out, tucking a strand of damp hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. I wanted your father to suffer as I suffered. To lose what he loved most, as I lost what I loved most. But unlike him, I wanted him to have to watch it happen. To see you bound to me, day after day, year after year, and know that he was powerless to change it. The cold calculation of it stole her breath. And me? What happens to me in this scenario? Ashton's hand dropped away. That, Isolde, depends entirely on you. Meaning I have no interest in forcing myself on an unwilling woman, revenge or no revenge. His voice hardened. But make no mistake, this is a real marriage. I expect loyalty, discretion, and public unity. In private, we will establish boundaries that work for both of us. Isolde studied him, searching for the trap in his words. And if those boundaries include separate bedrooms? For now, that's acceptable. The qualifier hung in the air between them. For now, go to bed, Isolde. It's been a long day, and tomorrow will be longer. Your first public appearance as Mrs. Thorne, the charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. The dismissal was clear, but Isolde found herself reluctant to leave without understanding the rules of this strange game. I don't understand you, Ashton. Nothing about today has gone as I expected. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good. I prefer to be underestimated rather than predictable. He turned back to his desk, effectively ending the conversation. Good night, wife. Isolde retreated to the master suite, her mind whirling with confusion. The man who had just dismissed her seemed at odds with the cold, vengeful figure who had demanded her hand in marriage. Which was the real Ashton Thorne? The ruthless businessman who had systematically destroyed her family's company? Or the man who, against all expectations, had respected her bodily autonomy on their wedding night? As she slipped between the cool sheets of the massive bed, Isolde realized that understanding her new husband might be both more complicated and more crucial than she had initially believed. If she was to survive this marriage, this elaborate revenge plot, she would need to decipher the contradictions that made up Ashton Thorne. Sleep eluded her for hours as she replayed their interactions, searching for clues, for weaknesses, for anything that might give her an advantage. When exhaustion finally claimed her, her last thought was that Regina Voss had been right about one thing. This was indeed a game. One with rules Isolde was only beginning to understand. If you've ever found yourself trying to understand someone whose actions contradict their words, you know how confusing it can be. Sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones we can't quite figure out. The weeks following the wedding established a routine that was both better and worse than Isolde had anticipated. Better, because Ashton maintained his unexpected respect for her physical boundaries, never pressuring her for the intimacy that was his legal right. Worse, because living in close proximity to him was an exercise in emotional whiplash. Some days, he was almost cordial, engaging her in surprisingly stimulating conversation over breakfast, seeking her opinion on art acquisitions for the penthouse, even sharing occasional dry observations that made her laugh despite herself. Other days, he was the cold, calculating businessman she had first encountered, barely acknowledging her presence except to issue instructions about upcoming social obligations or to critique some aspect of her performance as Mrs. Ashton Thorne. It was during one of these colder periods, 3 weeks into their marriage, that Isolde finally lost her patience. They were preparing to attend a dinner at the home of one of Ashton's business associates, and he had just informed her that her chosen dress, a deep blue sheath that she thought elegantly appropriate, was unacceptable. The Pierponts are old money, conservative in their tastes, he explained, scrolling through his phone without looking at her. That dress is too modern, too bold. The burgundy Valentino would be more suitable. The burgundy Valentino is also backless and cut nearly to my navel, Isolde pointed out, frustration evident in her voice. I thought you'd prefer I not look like arm candy. Ashton glanced up, his expression cool. What I prefer is that you present yourself in a way that reflects your position. As your revenge trophy, she challenged, echoing the words she had flung at him on their wedding night. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. As my wife, Isolde. A role you agreed to play convincingly, if you recall. I recall agreeing to marry you to save my family, she retorted. Not to surrender my identity or my ability to choose my own clothing. Your identity? Ashton set down his phone, giving her his full attention for the first time in days. And what identity would that be, exactly? The dutiful daughter of a man who killed my sister through negligence and greed. The sacrificial lamb offered up to appease the big bad wolf. His voice was deceptively soft, but his soul wasn't fooled. Or perhaps you mean the identity you've constructed for yourself, the intelligent, independent woman who just happened to benefit from her father's blood money, while remaining conveniently ignorant of its source. Each word struck like a physical blow, precise and devastating. That's not fair, she whispered. Isn't it? Ashton rose from his chair, closing the distance between them with predatory grace. Tell me, Isolde, did you ever question where the money came from for your expensive education? For the family vacations? The comfortable lifestyle? Or did you simply accept it all without looking too closely? I was a child, Isolde protested, though doubt had begun to creep in. Had she been willfully blind to her father's business practices? Had she unknowingly benefited from the same negligence that had cost Ashton's sister her life? And later, when you were no longer a child, Ashton pressed, his eyes never leaving hers. When you were studying business at Columbia, did you ever examine the company books? Ask uncomfortable questions about safety protocols or maintenance schedules. Isolde wanted to defend herself, to insist that she had known nothing of any wrongdoing. But the truth was more complicated. There had been moments, glimpses of things that didn't quite add up, questions her father had deflected, documents she'd been discouraged from examining too closely during her summer internships at Wintercrest Shipping. Her silence was apparently answer enough for Ashton. That's what I thought, he said, his voice softer now, but no less cutting. Wear whatever dress you prefer, Isolde. Just be ready to leave in 30 minutes. He turned to walk away, but Isolde caught his arm, unwilling to let the accusation stand unchallenged. You're right, she admitted, surprising him enough that he stopped. I didn't ask enough questions. I accepted my father's explanations because I trusted him, because it was easier than considering the alternative. She took a deep breath. But that doesn't make me complicit in what happened to your sister. And it doesn't justify what you're doing now. For a long moment, Ashton studied her, his expression unreadable. Get dressed, Isolde, he said finally. We'll finish this discussion another time. The evening at the Pierponts passed in a blur of forced smiles and careful small talk. Isolde wore the blue dress after all, a small act of defiance that did not go unnoticed by Ashton, though he made no comment. She played her role perfectly, the elegant, intelligent wife of one of New York's most powerful men, while inwardly still reeling from their confrontation. Had she really been so willfully blind? Had she accepted the benefits of her father's business practices without questioning their ethics? The possibility haunted her throughout the evening, making it difficult to focus on the meaningless social chatter around her. It was past midnight when they returned to the penthouse, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Isolde had just kicked off her heels when Ashton spoke. You did well tonight, he said, surprising her with what sounded like genuine approval. The Pierponts were impressed. Were they? Isolde couldn't keep the weariness from her voice. I hardly remember what we discussed. My mind was elsewhere. Ashton loosened his tie, regarding her with those penetrating gray eyes. On our conversation before we left. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. I've been thinking about what you said. About my complicity. And I think you're partially right, she admitted, the words difficult but necessary. I didn't ask enough questions. But neither did you. His eyebrows rose fractionally. Meaning you've spent 15 years constructing this elaborate revenge based on the assumption that my father was solely responsible for the accident that killed your sister. Isolde met his gaze steadily. What if it's more complicated than that? I've seen the evidence, Isolde. The maintenance records that were falsified. The safety inspections that were skipped. The corners that were cut to save money. Ashton's voice remained level, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands as he removed his cufflinks. Your father knew the risks and chose profit over safety. My sister paid the price. I believe you, Isolde said quietly. But what if he wasn't the only one making those choices? What if there were others involved? Have you considered that possibility? Something flickered in Ashton's eyes. Doubt. perhaps, or surprise at her challenge. I followed the evidence to the conclusion you wanted to reach, Isolde pointed out. Because it's easier to direct all your hate at one person than to consider a more complex truth. For a moment, she thought she had pushed too far. Ashton's expression darkened, his body tensing as though preparing for battle. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, harsh sound with no real humor in it. You're either very brave or very foolish to challenge me on this, Isolde. Perhaps both, she acknowledged. But if I'm going to be punished for my father's sins, don't I at least deserve to understand exactly what those sins were? Ashton studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Come with me, he said finally, turning toward his home office. Curious despite her apprehension, Isolde followed. In the office, Ashton unlocked a drawer in his desk and withdrew a thick file folder, placing it on the desk between them. Everything I've gathered over the years, he explained, his voice neutral but his eyes watching her closely. Maintenance records, safety reports, internal memos, witness statements. The complete story of how your father's negligence killed 11 people, including my 16-year-old sister. Isolde stared at the folder, suddenly uncertain. Did she really want to know? Could she handle the truth, whatever it might be? Why show me this now? She asked, buying time. Because you asked, Ashton replied simply. And because if you're going to defend him, you should know exactly what you're defending. The challenge was clear. Steeling herself, Isolde opened the folder and began to read. Hours later, as dawn crept over the Manhattan skyline, she closed the last document, her eyes burning with fatigue and unshed tears. The evidence was damning, a clear pattern of negligence, of safety protocols ignored, of warnings dismissed. Her father's signature on documents authorizing cost-cutting measures that directly contributed to the catastrophic equipment failure that had claimed 11 lives. Now you know, Ashton said quietly from where he sat across from her, having remained silent as she read through the night. Isolde looked up, meeting his gaze across the desk. Yes, she whispered. Now I know. The weight of it pressed down on her. The truth of her father's culpability, the lives destroyed by his decisions, the comfortable life she had enjoyed built on the suffering of others, including the teenage sister Ashton had lost, whose school photos stared up at her from the file. A pretty girl with Ashton's gray eyes and a bright smile, forever 16. Her name was Eliza, Ashton said, following her gaze to the photograph. She was spending the summer as an intern at one of my father's companies, learning about business. Her office was in the same building as the equipment that failed. The personal detail, offered voluntarily, caught Isolde by surprise. In the weeks they had lived together, Ashton had never once spoken his sister's name or shared any personal information about her. She was beautiful, Isolde said softly, the inadequacy of the words painfully apparent. She was brilliant, Ashton corrected, a hint of what might have been pride touching his voice. Top of her class. Accepted to MIT at 16. She wanted to study engineering, to build things that would change the world. His voice hardened. Instead, she died because a rich man wanted to be even richer. The accusation hung between them, impossible to refute in the face of the evidence Isolde had just reviewed. I'm sorry, she said finally, the words wholly insufficient but all she had to offer. What happened to Eliza, to all of them, was wrong. Unforgivable. Something shifted in Ashton's expression, not softening, exactly, but a subtle change that suggested her acknowledgement had registered. It was, he agreed, gathering the documents and returning them to the folder. Which is why your father needed to pay. Why he still needs to pay. Hasn't he? Isolde asked, thinking of her father's haggard face at the wedding, the weight of guilt and defeat evident in every line of his body. You've taken his company, his reputation, his daughter. What more do you want from him? Justice, Ashton replied simply. Something the courts failed to provide. And what does justice look like to you, Ashton? Isolde pressed, a chill running through her at his implacable tone. More destruction? More lives ruined? Perhaps, he acknowledged. His expression shuddered once more. Or perhaps just the truth, finally exposed for all to see. He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. It's late. You should get some rest. Isolde rose as well, exhaustion making her movements stiff. At the door, she paused, turning back to find Ashton watching her with those inscrutable gray eyes. Thank you, she said quietly. "For showing me the truth, even knowing it would hurt me." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, at her gratitude rather than recrimination. "You asked," he said simply. "I've never been one to shield people from uncomfortable truths." "No," Isolde agreed, a tired smile touching her lips. "That much is certainly clear." The next morning, Isolde woke to find the penthouse empty, a brief note from Ashton informing her that he would be in meetings all day. The distance was a relief after the emotional intensity of the previous night, giving her space to process what she had learned about her father and to reassess her understanding of her husband. The man who had orchestrated her family's downfall and forced her into marriage was still the same calculating, ruthless figure she had first encountered. But he was also a brother who had lost his sister to preventable negligence, a 16-year-old boy whose grief had hardened into an implacable quest for justice. The realization didn't excuse his actions, but it helped explain them in a way that made Ashton slightly more human, slightly less monstrous. And what of her own role in this tragedy? She had been a child when the accident occurred, innocent of any direct involvement. But she had benefited from the company's profits, had accepted her father's success without questioning its foundations. The realization left her feeling complicit in a way she had never considered before. Unable to sit with her thoughts any longer, Isolde dressed and left the penthouse, needing movement, air, distance from the luxurious prison that symbolized her new life. Without any clear destination in mind, she found herself walking toward Central Park, seeking the relative peace of nature amid the urban landscape. The day was crisp and clear, autumn painting the park in shades of gold and crimson. Isolde walked aimlessly, her mind churning with questions about her father, about Ashton, about her own blindness to truths she should have seen. So absorbed was she in her thoughts that she nearly collided with a man exiting a coffee shop near the park's edge. "I'm sorry," she began automatically, stepping back, then froze as recognition dawned. "Liam." Her younger brother stared back at her, surprise evident on his face. "Issy? What are you doing here?" "Walking. Thinking." She studied him, noting with concern the dark circles beneath his eyes, the pallor of his skin. At 20, Liam should have been the picture of youthful vitality, but his ongoing health issues, complications from a childhood illness, had left him perpetually frail. "Are you all right? You look tired." "I'm fine," he assured her, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just busy with classes." Pre-med isn't exactly known for its relaxed pace. "Of course," Isolde nodded, then gestured to a nearby bench. "Can you sit for a minute? I've missed you." They settled on the bench, an awkward silence falling between them. In the 3 weeks since her wedding, Isolde had spoken to her siblings only by phone, brief conversations that skated around the elephant in the room, her marriage to the man who had systematically destroyed their family's company. "How is everything?" Liam asked carefully, clearly uncertain how to navigate this new reality. Isolde hesitated, unwilling to burden her brother with the complex truth, but equally unwilling to lie. "It's not what I expected," she said finally. "Ashton is complicated." Liam's expression hardened at the mention of his brother-in-law's name. "Is he treating you well? Because if he's not mistreating me," Isolde assured him quickly, touched by his protective instinct despite knowing there was little Liam could do against someone as powerful as Ashton. "It's just an adjustment. For both of us." Liam studied her face, clearly searching for signs of distress or deception. "You tell me if it was bad, right? If you needed help." "Of course," Isolde lied, knowing she would never add to her brother's burdens. "But enough about me. How are you really? Your treatments?" Liam's smile turned genuine for the first time. "Actually, that's good news. The new medication is working better than expected. Dr. Winters thinks I might be a candidate for a more permanent solution, a specialized treatment they're developing at Northwestern." "Liam, that's wonderful," Isolde exclaimed, genuine joy breaking through her emotional exhaustion. After years of managing her brother's chronic condition with varying degrees of success, the prospect of a more lasting solution felt like a miracle. When would it happen? That's the thing. Liam's excitement dimmed slightly. It's still in the trial phase. Getting into the program is competitive, and even if I'm accepted, there are costs the insurance won't cover. Travel to Chicago, housing during the treatment period, follow-up care. "How much?" Isolde asked immediately. Issy, no. Liam shook his head firmly. You've already sacrificed enough for this family. I'm not asking you for money. You're not asking. I'm offering, Isolde insisted. How much, Liam? He sighed, recognizing the determined set of her jaw. About 70,000, all told. But it's a moot point right now. I haven't even been accepted to the program yet. Isolde's mind raced. She had a personal account that Ashton had established as part of their marriage agreement, a generous monthly allowance meant to cover her personal expenses. She had barely touched it, uncomfortable with accepting his money. But for Liam's health? That was different. When will you know about acceptance? She asked. A few weeks, maybe a month, Liam replied. But seriously, Issy, don't worry about the money. I'll figure something out. Maybe a research grant or a medical foundation. Let me help, Isolde insisted. Please, Liam, let me do this one thing. Her brother studied her face, clearly conflicted. Is this because you feel guilty? About the marriage? The direct question caught her off guard. Maybe partly, she admitted. But mostly it's because I love you, and I want you to have this chance. Liam's expression softened. I love you too, Issy. And I hate what you've had to do because of Dad's mistakes. The mention of their father brought back the revelations of the previous night, the damning evidence of his negligence, the lives lost because of his decisions. Isolde looked away, unable to meet her brother's gaze. You know, don't you? Liam asked quietly, surprising her. About what really happened at the shipping facility. About Dad's role in it. Isolde's head snapped up. You know? Liam's smile was sad. I found some documents a few years ago when I was looking for something in Dad's office. Old maintenance records, internal memos. Enough to piece together what happened. Why didn't you say anything? Isolde asked, stunned by the revelation that her supposedly sheltered younger brother had discovered the truth long before she had. What good would it have done? Liam shrugged. The legal case was closed. The families had settled. Bringing it up would only have hurt more people. He paused, studying her face. Is that why Thorne targeted our family? Because of the accident? His sister was one of the victims, Isolde confirmed, seeing no point in hiding what Liam had already figured out. Eliza Thorne. She was 16. Understanding dawned in Liam's eyes. That explains a lot. His vendetta against Dad, the systematic dismantling of the company. He hesitated, then added softly, the marriage. Yes, Isolde acknowledged. It was never about business. It was always personal. They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of this shared understanding. Finally, Liam reached out, squeezing her hand. I should go. I have a lab in 30 minutes. But Issy, be careful. A man driven by that kind of revenge isn't likely to be satisfied by a business takeover and a marriage certificate. What do you mean? Isolde asked, though a chill ran through her at her brother's warning. I mean Ashton Thorne hasn't finished yet, Liam replied gravely. Whatever his endgame is, I doubt it stops with making you his wife. The warning stayed with Isolde long after Liam had gone, adding a new dimension to her already complicated understanding of her husband. What was Ashton's ultimate goal? Was the marriage truly the culmination of his revenge, or merely a step towards something else, something worse? By the time she returned to the penthouse, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the elegant living room. Ashton was already home, his jacket discarded, a glass of scotch in hand as he stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city below. You were gone all day, he observed without turning, his tone neutral rather than accusatory. I needed to think, Isolde replied, setting down her purse. Process what I learned last night. Now he did turn, his gray eyes studying her with that penetrating intensity that always made her feel exposed. And what conclusions did you reach? Isolde met his gaze steadily. That my father was negligent. That his decisions cost lives, including your sister's. That he deserves to face consequences for those actions. She took a deep breath. But also that your revenge has affected innocent people, my siblings, who had nothing to do with what happened 15 years ago. Ashton took a sip of his scotch, his expression unreadable. Collateral damage is inevitable in war, Isolde. Is that what this is to you? A war? What would you call it? The question hung between them, challenging her to define the complex web of vengeance, grief, and manipulation that had brought them to this point. Before she could formulate an answer, Ashton's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then back at her. We'll continue this discussion later, he said, already moving toward his office. Regina is calling about the Singapore acquisition. Alone again, Isolde sank onto the sofa, the emotional exhaustion of the past 24 hours finally catching up with her. Her mind returned to Liam's warning, to the question of what Ashton ultimately wanted. If destroying Wintercrest shipping and forcing her into marriage wasn't enough, what would satisfy his need for justice? For revenge? The answer, when it came, sent a chill through her. If Ashton's goal was to make her father suffer as he had suffered, to lose what he loved most as Ashton had lost what he loved most, then the marriage was only part of the equation. To truly mirror Ashton's loss, her father would need to lose a child, not to marriage, but permanently. Was that Ashton's ultimate plan? To use her to inflict the maximum possible pain on her father, and then, what? The thought was too horrifying to complete. And yet, it didn't align with the man she had come to know over the past weeks. The man who, despite his cold exterior and stated intentions, had respected her boundaries. Who had shown her the truth about her father, painful as it was. Who, in unguarded moments, revealed glimpses of humanity beneath the calculating facade. Confused and troubled, Isolde rose from the sofa and made her way to her room. Technically their room, though Ashton had yet to sleep there, maintaining separate quarters as promised on their wedding night. As she prepared for bed, her mind continued to churn with questions about her husband's true intentions, about where this strange, forced marriage was leading, about whether there could possibly be a path forward that didn't end in more destruction. Sleep, when it finally came, brought no answers. Only dreams of Eliza Thorne's smiling face, of her father's haunted eyes, and of Ashton standing at a crossroads, torn between vengeance and something else, something that looked almost like redemption. If you've ever found yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about someone, hit that like button. Sometimes the most difficult truths to accept are the ones that force us to see people not as heroes or villains, but as flawed, complex human beings capable of both terrible mistakes and unexpected compassion. The following morning brought an unexpected development, an urgent call from Mira, her voice tight with panic. Dad's been taken to the hospital, she blurted before Isolde could even say hello. They think it might be a heart attack. Isolde's blood ran cold. Which hospital? Mount Sinai. Issy, it's bad. The doctors are saying. I'm on my way, Isolde interrupted, already moving toward her closet. Stay with him, Mira. I'll be there as soon as I can. Ending the call, she dressed quickly in the first clothes she could grab, her mind racing. Her father had always been healthy, vital despite his 58 years. But the stress of the past months, the company's collapse, the forced marriage of his daughter, the weight of his past sins being exposed, had clearly taken a toll. As she rushed through the penthouse, gathering her purse and phone, Ashton emerged from his office, eyebrows raised at her obvious distress. My father's in the hospital, Isolde explained tersely, not slowing her pace. Possible heart attack. Ashton's expression remained impassive. I see. His lack of reaction, the absence of even basic human concern, ignited a spark of anger in Isolde's chest. That's all you have to say? A man might be dying, and all you can offer is, I see? What would you prefer, Isolde? False sympathy for someone whose actions kill my sister. Ashton's voice was cool, controlled. Should I pretend concern for your father's well-being when we both know I consider his suffering justified? The brutal honesty stopped her in her tracks. Of course Ashton wouldn't care. Might even welcome the news. This was, after all, the culmination of his revenge, her father suffering not just financially and emotionally, but physically. Fine, she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. I'm going to the hospital. I don't know when I'll be back. Isolde, Ashton called as she reached the elevator. She paused, not turning. Take the car. It's waiting downstairs. The unexpected consideration, practical rather than emotional, but still a concession, caught her off guard. Thank you, she managed, stepping into the elevator before he could see the tears threatening to fall. The drive to Mount Sinai passed in a blur of anxiety and dread. Isolde found herself praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in, bargaining for her father's life even as part of her acknowledged the bitter irony. She was now desperately trying to save the man whose negligence had cost 11 others their lives. At the hospital, she found Mira in the cardiac ICU waiting room, her face tear-streaked and pale. How is he? Isolde asked, embracing her sister tightly. Stable for now, Mira replied, her voice small and frightened. They're running tests. The doctor said it was definitely a heart attack, but they don't know how much damage was done. She pulled back, studying Isolde's face. Liam's on his way. He was in class when it happened. Isolde nodded, guiding her sister back to the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. Have you been able to see Dad? Briefly. He was. Myra's voice caught. He looks so small, Issy. So frail. Not like Dad at all. The description sent a pang through Isolde's heart. Their father had always been larger than life. Confident, commanding, the center of their family universe. To imagine him diminished by illness was almost impossible. He's going to be all right, Isolde assured her sister, with more confidence than she felt. Dad's strong. He'll pull through this. Mira nodded, clinging to the comfort offered. The doctor said family history is a factor in heart disease. Did you know Grandpa died of a heart attack? I didn't even know that. I didn't either, Isolde admitted, realizing how little she actually knew about her father's background. Like so many aspects of their family history, medical issues had been glossed over, minimized, kept private. Just like the truth about the accident that had killed Eliza Thorne and 10 others. The thought brought with it a wave of conflicting emotions. Anger at her father for his deception, guilt for her own willful blindness, confusion about where to direct her loyalty now that she knew the truth. She loved her father, despite his flaws, despite his negligence. But she could no longer pretend that he was the man she had believed him to be. They waited for hours, Liam joining them midway through the afternoon, his face drawn with worry. When the doctor finally emerged to speak with them, his expression was cautiously optimistic. Your father suffered a significant cardiac event, he explained, but we were able to stabilize him quickly. The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical, but barring complications, I believe he'll recover. The relief was palpable, all 3 siblings exhaling breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. Can we see him? Liam asked. Briefly, the doctor nodded. He's heavily sedated, but sometimes patients are aware of family presence even when they appear to be sleeping. One at a time, please, and only for a few minutes each. Isolde insisted that her siblings go first, needing time to compose herself before facing her father. When her turn came, she entered the ICU room with trepidation, unprepared for the sight that greeted her. Richard Winters, once robust and commanding, lay pale and still against the white hospital sheets, tubes and wires connecting him to various monitors and machines. His face seemed to have aged a decade since she had last seen him at her wedding 3 weeks earlier, deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes, his skin ashen beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, moving to his bedside and taking his hand. Cool and limp, so unlike the warm, firm grip she remembered from childhood. For a long moment, she simply stood there, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. What did one say to a parent who had fallen so far from the pedestal on which you had placed them? How did you reconcile love with disappointment, loyalty with the knowledge of unforgivable mistakes? I know what happened, she said finally, her voice barely audible. About the accident. About Eliza Thorne and the others. I've seen the evidence. She swallowed hard. I wish you had told me the truth. I wish I hadn't had to learn it from him. Her father remained still, giving no indication that he heard or understood. Perhaps that was for the best. This wasn't a conversation for a hospital room, with one participant unconscious and vulnerable. I love you, Dad, Isolde continued, squeezing his hand gently. Despite everything. I needed you to know that. A movement at the door caught her attention. Expecting to see a nurse, Isolde turned and froze in shock. Ashton stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene before him. What are you doing here? Isolde asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ashton's gaze moved from her to the still form of her father, something complicated passing across his features. I came to check on you, he said finally. You've been gone for hours. I was concerned. The admission seemed to cost him, the words coming reluctantly, as though extracted under duress. Isolde stared at him, trying to reconcile this apparent concern with the man who had shown such callous disregard for her father's condition that morning. He's stable, she said cautiously. The doctor thinks he'll recover. Ashton nodded, his expression still inscrutable. Good. Good. Isolde couldn't keep the confusion from her voice. This morning you practically said you'd be glad if he died. I said no such thing, Ashton corrected, his tone mild. I merely declined to express false sympathy. And now? He hesitated, seemingly weighing his words carefully. Now I'm here to take you home, Isolde. You look exhausted. It wasn't an answer, not really, but Isolde was too emotionally drained to press for more. I should stay, she protested. In case his condition changes. Your siblings are here, Ashton pointed out reasonably. They can call if there's any change. You need rest. The concern seemed genuine, which only confused Isolde further. Why would Ashton care about her well-being? Why come to the hospital at all, when he could have simply waited for her to return to the penthouse? Before she could formulate a response, a nurse entered, politely but firmly informing them that visiting time was over. Isolde reluctantly released her father's hand, brushing a kiss against his forehead before allowing Ashton to guide her from the room. In the waiting room, Mira and Liam looked up in surprise at Ashton's presence, wariness evident in their expressions. Mr. Thorne, Liam acknowledged stiffly, positioning himself slightly in front of Mira in an unconsciously protective gesture. Liam, Ashton nodded. Mira, I'm sorry about your father's condition. The polite condolence, delivered in Ashton's usual controlled tone, nevertheless seemed sincere enough to catch all three Winters' siblings off guard. Thank you, Mira replied cautiously. I'm taking Isolde home to rest, Ashton continued, his hand coming to rest lightly at the small of Isolde's back. She'll return in the morning. Please call if there's any change in your father's condition. The presumption that he could make decisions on her behalf irritated Isolde, but she was too exhausted to argue. I'll have my phone on all night, she assured her siblings. Call for anything, no matter how small. After quick hugs and promises to return first thing in the morning, Isolde allowed Ashton to escort her from the hospital to the waiting car. The drive back to the penthouse passed in silence, Isolde too drained to engage in conversation, Ashton seemingly content to leave her to her thoughts. It wasn't until they were in the elevator ascending to the penthouse that Isolde finally spoke. Why did you really come to the hospital, Ashton? He glanced down at her, his expression thoughtful. Would you believe me if I said I was concerned about you? Should I? The elevator doors opened, and Ashton gestured for her to precede him into the penthouse. That's for you to decide, Isolde. I've never lied to you. I don't intend to start now. The simple statement, delivered without emotion or embellishment, struck Isolde as perhaps the most honest thing Ashton had ever said to her. He hadn't lied, not about his motivations for the marriage, not about her father's culpability, not about his own feelings regarding Richard Winters. His truths might be brutal, but they were truths nonetheless. Thank you, she said finally, for coming, for the car, for, she hesitated, uncertain how to express what she meant, for not being cruel about my father's condition. Something flickered in Ashton's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at her gratitude. Even monsters have lines they won't cross, Isolde. Is that how you see yourself? As a monster? The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, his customary mask of control slipped, revealing a glimpse of something vulnerable beneath. It's how most people see me, he replied finally. Including you, I suspect. Isolde studied him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. Not as the villain of her story or the cold businessman who had orchestrated her family's downfall, but as a complex human being shaped by loss and grief as much as by ambition and calculation. I don't know what I believe anymore, she admitted, the events of the day catching up with her in a wave of exhaustion. About you. About my father. About any of this. Ashton nodded, accepting her confusion without comment. You should rest, he said, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. As Isolde turned toward the bedroom, Ashton called after her. Isolde. She paused, looking back at him. Whatever happens with your father, I won't interfere with your relationship with him. Whatever is between him and me doesn't extend to preventing you from being his daughter. The concession, unexpected and surprisingly generous, left Isolde momentarily speechless. Thank you, she managed finally. That means a lot to me. Ashton inclined his head slightly, then turned toward his office, effectively ending the conversation. Isolde watched him go, more confused than ever about the man she had married. The ruthless businessman who had destroyed her family's company and forced her into marriage was the same man who had just offered her an unexpected kindness in the midst of crisis. As she prepared for bed, Isolde found herself wondering which was the real Ashton Thorne, the calculating avenger or the man capable of compassion even toward the family of his enemy. Or was he both? Could such contradictions exist within the same person? The questions followed her into sleep, where she dreamed of gray eyes that held both ice and fire, of hands that could destroy and heal, of a man walking the knife's edge between vengeance and redemption. When she woke the next morning, Ashton was already gone, a note on the kitchen counter informing her that the car would be available all day for her trips to and from the hospital. No mention of their conversation the previous night, no reference to his unexpected appearance at her father's bedside. Just a practical arrangement to facilitate her needs. Yet somehow, in that simple consideration, Isolde sensed a shift in their relationship, subtle but significant, like the first crack in a wall of ice. What that shift meant, where it might lead, she couldn't begin to guess. But as she prepared to return to the hospital, she found herself hoping, against all logic and evidence, that there might be more to Ashton Thorne than she had initially believed. More to their marriage than a carefully orchestrated revenge. More possibility for both of them than the roles they had been assigned in this tragedy that had begun 15 years ago with an accident that had claimed 11 lives, including that of a 16-year-old girl named Eliza. Share this story if you believe that even the most complicated relationships can sometimes lead to unexpected healing. In our next part, we'll discover what happens when a corporate crisis forces Ashton and Isolde to work together, revealing strengths neither knew the other possessed, and feelings neither is prepared to acknowledge. The following weeks established a new rhythm to Isolde and Ashton's strange marriage. Each morning, Ashton would leave early for Thorne Industries, while Isolde divided her time between the penthouse and the hospital, where her father was making a slow but steady recovery. True to his word, Ashton never interfered with her visits, the car and driver remaining at her disposal without comment or complaint. In the evenings, they would share dinner when Ashton's schedule permitted, their conversations carefully neutral, discussions of art, literature, current events, anything that avoided the complicated history between their families. Sometimes, in these moments of relative peace, Isolde would catch glimpses of the man beneath the cold, controlled exterior, a dry wit, a surprising depth of knowledge on unexpected subjects, a capacity for listening that few would have attributed to the notoriously dominant CEO. 3 weeks after her father's heart attack, as autumn deepened toward winter, Isolde returned from the hospital to find Ashton in his home office, his expression unusually tense as he spoke rapidly into his phone. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying, his voice sharp with controlled anger. "Find the source of the leak and contain it. Now." He ended the call with a forceful tap, then looked up to find Isolde watching him from the doorway. "Problem?" she asked, expecting a dismissive response. To her surprise, Ashton ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration from a man who prized control above all else. "A significant one," he admitted. "Someone leaked confidential information about our new security platform. The press has it, our competitors have it, and our stock is already dropping in after-hours trading." Isolde hesitated, uncertain whether to offer sympathy or simply retreat. Before she could decide, Ashton continued, almost as if thinking aloud. "The timing couldn't be worse. We're 6 weeks from launch, too far along to pivot completely, but early enough that competitors could potentially beat us to market with similar features. Can you identify who leaked it?" Isolde asked, surprising herself by engaging with his business concern. Ashton's gray eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. "We have suspects. 3 people with the right level of access and potential motives. The challenge is proving it before more damage is done." Something in his expression, the combination of frustration and calculation, sparked an idea in Isolde's mind. "You're approaching this like a security breach," she observed. "But what if it's more of a public relations opportunity?" Ashton's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Explain." Isolde stepped further into the office, her business training from Columbia surfacing as she warmed to the concept. "Instead of trying to contain the leak, what if you controlled the narrative? Confirm the features that were leaked, but reveal that they're only part of a more comprehensive platform. Position it as a deliberate strategy, a teaser for what's coming. Transform a breach into a marketing campaign," Ashton summarized, studying her with newfound interest. Intriguing, but risky. We'd be showing our hand earlier than planned. Only partially, Isolde countered. You'd be acknowledging what's already out there while suggesting there's more to come. It creates anticipation rather than damage control. For a long moment, Ashton considered her suggestion, his expression thoughtful. Then, to Isolde's surprise, he nodded. It could work. We need to move quickly, coordinate with marketing, prepare a statement for investors. He was already reaching for his phone, then paused, looking back at her. Where did you learn to think like that? Isolde smiled slightly. I did graduate top of my class in business, Ashton. Before my family's company collapsed, and I became a revenge marriage trophy. The barb was softened by her tone, almost teasing rather than bitter. Ashton's lips curved in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Clearly I underestimated your capabilities. Most people do, Isolde replied with a shrug. It's occasionally useful. Ashton studied her for another moment, then made a decision. I need to go to the office. This will require immediate attention. He hesitated, then added, would you be willing to come with me? Your perspective could be valuable. The invitation, the first time he had included her in any aspect of his professional life, caught Isolde off guard. You want my help? I want your brain, Ashton clarified, though something in his expression suggested he might have been equally surprised by his own request. Your approach is unconventional, fresh. It could be exactly what we need right now. Isolde considered refusing. It was nearly 9 in the evening. She was tired from her day at the hospital, and helping Ashton with his business crisis felt oddly like a betrayal of her family's company, despite the fact that Wintercrest Shipping operated in an entirely different industry. Yet she found herself nodding. I'll get my coat. The Thorn Industries headquarters hummed with activity despite the late hour. Executives and PR specialists gathered in the main conference room to address the crisis. Isolde felt the curious stares as Ashton led her into the room, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back, a proprietary gesture that was becoming familiar, though no less disconcerting. Mrs. Thorne will be joining us, Ashton announced without preamble or explanation, guiding her to a seat beside his at the head of the table. She has an interesting perspective on our situation. Regina Voss, whom Isolde remembered from their brief interaction at the wedding reception, raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow, but said nothing. The others around the table, all men, Isolde noted, regarded her with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. The situation, for those just arriving, Ashton continued, is that key features of the Aurora platform have been leaked to both the press and our competitors. Our options are limited and time is critical. He turned to Isolde, a clear invitation for her to share her idea. Taking a deep breath, she outlined her strategy, acknowledging the leaked features as part of a deliberate preview campaign, suggesting there were more significant innovations still under wraps, positioning the company as confident rather than compromised. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Regina spoke, her tone measured. It's risky. We'd be gambling that the actual platform will live up to the heightened expectations we'd be creating. It will, Ashton said with absolute confidence. The question is whether we can execute this strategy effectively on such short notice. We'd need a press release tonight, offered a man Isolde didn't recognize. Social media campaign launched by morning. Investor call before the market opens. And a clear message about what we're confirming versus what we're still keeping under wraps, added another executive. As the discussion continued, evolving rapidly into an action plan, Isolde found herself drawn into the creative problem-solving, offering suggestions about messaging and audience targeting that were met with increasing respect from the team. Ashton, she noticed, did not interrupt or attempt to claim credit for her ideas, a courtesy she suspected he rarely extended to others. It was past midnight when the immediate crisis had been addressed, press release drafted, social media strategy outlined, key talking points for the morning's investor call established. As the team dispersed to execute their assigned tasks, Ashton turned to Isolde. You're good at this, he said, his tone suggesting the admission surprised him. Very good. Thank you, Isolde replied, surprised by how much the simple acknowledgement pleased her. It felt good to use my brain for something other than. She trailed off, unsure how to characterize her current role in his life. Being my wife, Ashton supplied, a hint of something like self-awareness in his tone. Something like that, Isolde agreed. They were alone in the conference room now, the last of the executives having departed to prepare for the early morning media blitz. Ashton studied her, his expression thoughtful. "You miss it," he observed. "The business world. Problem-solving. Being valued for your mind rather than your other attributes." The assessment was accurate enough to sting slightly. "Is that surprising? I spent 4 years earning my MBA, and before that, summers interning at my family's company. I had plans, ambitions." She met his gaze directly. "Before you destroyed Wintercrest Shipping." Ashton didn't flinch from the accusation. "Your father destroyed his own company through years of mismanagement and corner-cutting. I merely accelerated the inevitable." "Perhaps," Isolde acknowledged, too tired to argue the point. "But my career was collateral damage in your vendetta." Something shifted in Ashton's expression, not quite remorse, but a recognition of the unintended consequences of his actions. "What would you have done?" he asked, surprising her with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "If circumstances had been different, what was your plan?" The question caught Isolde off guard. No one had asked about her professional aspirations since before the marriage, not even her family, who had been too consumed by their financial crisis to consider her sacrificed ambitions. "I wanted to modernize Wintercrest," she said finally. "Implement sustainable shipping practices, invest in cleaner technologies, establish more transparent safety protocols." She gave a bitter laugh. "Ironic, considering what I now know about my father's history with safety standards." Ashton nodded, absorbing this. "You would have changed things." "I would have tried," Isolde corrected, "though I suspect my father would have resisted. He was set in his ways." They fell silent, both contemplating the paths not taken, the futures altered by choices made years before. Finally, Ashton stood, offering her his hand. "It's late. We should go home." Home. The word hung between them, loaded with implications neither was prepared to examine. The penthouse was where they lived, but it had never felt like home to Isolde, more like an elegant prison, the price of her family's salvation. Yet as they rode the elevator down to the waiting car, Isolde found herself wondering if that perception might be changing. Tonight, for the first time since their marriage, she had felt like a partner rather than a possession. Ashton had valued her mind, respected her ideas, included her in something that mattered to him. It was a small shift, perhaps insignificant in the broader context of their arrangement. But as they drove through the quiet city streets, Isolde couldn't help feeling that something fundamental had changed between them, a crack in the wall of mutual resentment and distrust that had defined their relationship from the beginning. The following morning, Isolde woke to find Ashton already gone, a note on her bedside table informing her that he would be at the office for the investor call and subsequent media interviews. The car was at her disposal, as always, for her hospital visit. What surprised her was the postscript. "Thank you for your help last night. Your strategy was the right approach." The simple acknowledgement, so unlike Ashton's usual terse communications, brought an unexpected warmth to her chest. Recognition of her capabilities, appreciation for her contribution, these were things she had not expected from the man who had forced her into marriage as part of an elaborate revenge. At the hospital, she found her father sitting up in bed, color returning to his face as he argued good-naturedly with a nurse about his restricted diet. Seeing Isolde, he brightened further. "There she is, my beautiful daughter, come to rescue me from this prison of bland food and endless beeping machines." Isolde smiled, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Not quite yet, Dad. The doctors say you need at least another week here." Richard Winters made a show of groaning in dismay, but his eyes were clear and alert, a marked improvement from the pale, unconscious figure of 3 weeks ago. "How are you, sweetheart? You look tired." "Late night," Isolde explained, settling into the chair beside his bed. "A work situation." Her father's eyebrows rose. "You're working?" For him. The hesitation before the pronoun, the inability to say Ashton's name, these were telling indicators of her father's feelings toward his son-in-law. Isolde chose her words carefully. "Not exactly. There was a crisis at his company, and I offered a suggestion that helped address it." "I see." Her father's expression clouded slightly. "And how is married life?" The awkward question hung between them, loaded with unspoken concerns and guilt. Since his heart attack, they had carefully avoided discussing her marriage, focusing instead on his recovery and mundane family matters. "It's complicated," Isolde admitted. but not as terrible as I initially feared. Richard studied her face, concern evident in his eyes. He's not mistreating you, is he? Because if he is, heart attack or no heart attack, He's not, Isolde interrupted gently. In fact, he's been surprisingly decent about your illness. He makes sure I have the car to visit you every day, never questions how long I stay. Her father looked skeptical. The bare minimum of human decency hardly makes him husband of the year, Isolde. No, she agreed. But considering his feelings about you, it's more than I expected. The reference to Ashton's animosity toward her father hung in the air between them, a subject they had yet to address directly. Richard looked away, his expression troubled. I never wanted you to know, he said finally, his voice low. About my role in that accident. About the compromises I made. Isolde took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation they should have had years ago. But I do know, Dad. I've seen the documents, the evidence Ashton collected. I know what happened. Her father closed his eyes briefly, pain etching new lines into his face. I'm not proud of the decisions I made back then, Isolde. I was under financial pressure, trying to keep the company afloat during a recession. I cut corners I shouldn't have, delayed maintenance that couldn't safely be postponed. 11 people died, Isolde said quietly, including Ashton's sister. She was 16, Dad. I know. Richard's voice broke on the words. Not a day goes by that I don't think about those lives, that I don't regret the choices I made. Why didn't you tell me? Isolde asked, the question that had haunted her since learning the truth. All these years, you let me believe the accident was just that, an accident, not the result of deliberate negligence. Her father met her gaze, shame evident in his eyes. How could I tell you? How could I admit to my daughter that I was responsible for such suffering? That the life we had, your education, our home, everything, was built on the backs of those victims? The brutal honesty of his response left Isolde momentarily speechless. She had expected denials, minimizations, excuses, not this raw acknowledgement of guilt. I'm sorry, Isolde, Richard continued, reaching for her hand. For what I did back then. For what it's cost you now. This marriage, this sacrifice you've made, it's the price of my sins, not yours. Isolde squeezed his hand, her heart conflicted. The man before her was both the loving father who had supported her dreams and the negligent businessman whose decisions had caused untold suffering. How did one reconcile such contradictions? I forgive you, Dad, she said finally, the words coming from a place of love rather than absolution. But it's not just me you need to make peace with. Richard's expression hardened slightly. Thorne has extracted his pound of flesh, Isolde. My company, my reputation, my daughter, what more could he possibly want? Maybe it's not about what he wants anymore, Isolde suggested quietly. Maybe it's about what's right. Acknowledgement. Accountability. The truth, finally made public. Her father stared at her, disbelief evident in his expression. You're taking his side? After what he's done to our family. I'm not taking sides, Isolde corrected gently. I'm trying to understand all of this. Your mistakes, his revenge, my place in between. There's been enough destruction, Dad. Maybe the path forward is through truth, not more secrets and resentment. Before her father could respond, a nurse entered to check his vital signs, effectively ending their conversation. Perhaps it was for the best. Some truths needed time to be absorbed, especially by a man still recovering from a heart attack. As Isolde left the hospital that afternoon, her mind was heavy with the morning's conversation. For the first time, she found herself truly caught between two perspectives, her father's remorse and Ashton's righteous anger, both valid, both painful, both incomplete without the other. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the breaking news alert on her phone. Thorne Industries stock soars following strategic information release about new security platform. Tapping the notification, she found herself looking at a video of Ashton addressing investors that morning, his expression confident as he reframed the previous night's leak as a deliberate preview strategy. The market had responded enthusiastically, with the stock rising nearly 8%, an extraordinary gain for a company of Thorne Industries' size. As she watched Ashton deftly field questions from financial analysts, Isolde felt an unexpected surge of pride. This was partially her strategy, her idea that had transformed a potential disaster into a triumph. And Ashton, to his credit, had executed it flawlessly. Her phone rang in her hand, Ashton's name appearing on the screen. Isolde answered, curiosity overriding her usual caution. I see the strategy worked, she said by way of greeting. Beyond expectations, Ashton replied, and she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. The board is ecstatic. The crisis has been completely reframed. Congratulations, Isolde said sincerely. You handled the investors beautifully. We handled it, Ashton corrected, surprising her with the shared credit. Your strategy, my execution. An effective partnership. The word hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to examine. Partnership suggested equality, mutual respect, shared goals, concepts far removed from their arrangement's original terms. I'm having dinner with the board tonight to discuss next steps, Ashton continued, apparently oblivious to her momentary silence. But I wondered if you might be available tomorrow evening. For what? Isolde asked, caught off guard by what sounded suspiciously like an invitation rather than a directive. Dinner, Ashton replied. To celebrate the successful crisis management. And to discuss something else I'd like your perspective on. Isolde hesitated, unsure what to make of this unprecedented request. In the 3 months of their marriage, Ashton had never suggested anything resembling a social engagement. Their meals together had been matters of convenience rather than choice. Unless you've made other plans, he added, a hint of uncertainty in his tone that seemed wholly out of character for the confident CEO. No, Isolde found herself saying. No other plans. Dinner would be nice. Good. Was that relief she heard in his voice? I'll make reservations at Oriole for 7. After disconnecting the call, Isolde stood on the hospital steps, perplexed by the exchange. Had Ashton Thorne, the man who had orchestrated her family's downfall and forced her into marriage as revenge, just asked her on what sounded remarkably like a date? More disconcerting still was her own response, not dread or resentment, but a flutter of something that felt dangerously like anticipation. If you've ever experienced that confusing moment when someone you thought you understood completely reveals an unexpected side, you know how disorienting it can be. Sometimes the most surprising discoveries are the ones that make us question our own feelings. The following evening found Isolde in her closet, surveying her options with uncharacteristic indecision. The collection of designer clothes Ashton had provided upon their marriage offered endless possibilities, yet nothing seemed quite right for whatever this dinner represented. Celebration? Business discussion? Something else entirely? Finally, she selected a deep emerald dress that complemented her dark hair and olive complexion without being overtly seductive. Elegant, but not trying too hard. Appropriate for any interpretation of the evening ahead. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Ashton waiting in the living room, his tall frame impeccable in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. He turned at the sound of her approach, and something flickered in his gray eyes as they traveled from her face to the dress and back again. You look beautiful, he said simply. The compliment, delivered without his usual calculating assessment, caught Isolde off guard. Thank you, she replied, oddly flustered by his direct gaze. You look nice too. A ghost of a smile touched Ashton's lips. High praise indeed. Shall we? Oriole was one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, known for both its exquisite cuisine and its romantic atmosphere, an unusual choice for a business celebration. As the maitre d' led them to a secluded corner table, Isolde noticed the candlelight, the fresh flowers, the subtle privacy afforded by their position away from other diners. This is lovely, she commented as Ashton held her chair. Though perhaps overkill for a simple business success. Ashton took the seat across from her, his expression unreadable. Perhaps I wanted something more personal than a corporate celebration. The admission hung between them, unexpected and impossible to misinterpret. This was not a business dinner. Not entirely, at least. Before Isolde could respond, a sommelier appeared to present the wine list. Ashton ordered a bottle of Bordeaux without consulting her, a small reminder of the power dynamics that still defined their relationship despite the evening's veneer of normalcy. Once they were alone again, Isolde found herself unsure how to proceed. Their usual conversations at home were carefully restricted to safe topics: art, current events, literature. Anything too personal remained off-limits by mutual, unspoken agreement. How is your father? Ashton asked, surprising her with the direct inquiry. In the weeks since Richard's heart attack, He had never once asked about her father's condition. Improving, Isolde replied cautiously. The doctors are pleased with his progress. He may be released next week. Ashton nodded, his expression giving nothing away. Good. And your siblings? How are they handling everything? The continued personal interest bewildered Isolde. They're coping. Mira has taken a leave from school to help with Dad's recovery plans. Liam is juggling his pre-med studies with hospital visits. And your brother's health? Has there been any word about the treatment program at Northwestern? Isolde stared at him, genuinely shocked. How do you know about that? A slight shrug. I make it my business to know things, Isolde. Especially about matters that concern you. The implication that he had been monitoring her family, gathering information without her knowledge, should have angered her. Instead, Isolde found herself oddly touched that he had paid such close attention to details she had never shared with him. Liam was accepted into the program, she said after a moment. But the financial aspects are still complicated. Ashton studied her over the rim of his water glass. You haven't used your personal account for his treatment costs. It wasn't a question, but Isolde answered anyway. No, it didn't seem appropriate, given the circumstances. Because the money comes from me? Ashton's direct gaze made evasion impossible. A man who destroyed your family's company. Something like that, Isolde acknowledged. Ashton set down his glass, his expression thoughtful. What if the money came from a different source? A medical foundation, perhaps. One that specializes in supporting promising young medical students with health challenges of their own. Isolde narrowed her eyes, suspicion dawning. Does such a foundation exist? It could, Ashton replied, his tone casual but his eyes intent on her face. By next week, if necessary. The implication was clear. He was offering to create a foundation to fund Liam's treatment in a way that would spare both Isolde's pride and her brother's. It was manipulative, high-handed, and presumptuous. It was also undeniably kind. Why would you do that? Isolde asked, genuinely perplexed by this unexpected generosity toward the family of his enemy. What do you gain? Something flashed in Ashton's eyes, hurt, perhaps, at her assumption of ulterior motives. Not everything is a transaction, Isolde. In my experience with you, it has been, she countered, though without rancor. Our marriage is literally a transaction, my hand in exchange for my family's financial salvation. Perhaps I'm evolving, Ashton suggested, a hint of self-awareness in his tone that surprised her. Or perhaps I simply recognize that your brother's health should not be collateral damage in a vendetta that has nothing to do with him. Before Isolde could respond, their first course arrived, an artful arrangement of seafood that momentarily diverted the conversation to safer topics. As they ate, Ashton steered the discussion toward her education, her professional interests, her views on business ethics, areas they had never explored in their months of cohabitation. By the time dessert arrived, Isolde found herself genuinely enjoying Ashton's company, drawn into his incisive mind and unexpected flashes of dry humor. The wine and intimate setting didn't hurt, creating an atmosphere far removed from their usual careful interactions at the penthouse. You mentioned wanting my perspective on something, Isolde reminded him as they lingered over coffee. Beyond the crisis management from the other night. Yes. Ashton set down his cup, his expression turning more serious. I've been considering a new division within Thorn Industries, one focused on sustainable technology solutions for traditional industries. Shipping, manufacturing, resource extraction. Isolde's interest was immediately piqued. That's quite a departure from your usual focus on digital security and software. It is, Ashton acknowledged. Which is why I need someone with fresh perspective to lead it. Someone who understands both traditional industry challenges and modern sustainability imperatives. Understanding dawned. You want my input on who to hire? No. Ashton met her gaze directly. I want you to consider taking the position yourself. The offer was so unexpected that Isolde could only stare at him, certain she had misheard. You want me to work for you? At Thorn Industries. With me? Ashton corrected. As division head, reporting directly to the board, not to me. You would have significant autonomy, your own team, a substantial budget for development and acquisition. Why? Isolde managed, still struggling to process the proposal. Why would you offer me this? Because you're qualified, Ashton replied simply. Your academic record is impeccable. Your understanding of traditional industries, particularly shipping, gives you insight most tech executives lack. And you've demonstrated an innovative approach to problem solving that would be valuable in this new venture. The clinical assessment was flattering but incomplete. And the fact that I'm your wife? That I'm the daughter of the man you've spent 15 years trying to destroy? Those factors don't complicate things in your mind. Ashton's expression remained steady. Their considerations, certainly, but not disqualifying ones. The position would be based on merit, is sold, not our personal connection. It would appear nepotistic, she pointed out. Your own wife, given a division to run. Perhaps initially, Ashton conceded. But your performance would quickly dispel such concerns. I've seen how your mind works, is sold. You would excel in this role. The confidence in his assessment was both flattering and disorienting. For months, Isolde had viewed herself primarily as a pawn in Ashton's revenge, a trophy wife acquired to punish her father. The idea that he saw her as a capable professional, someone worthy of significant responsibility within his company, represented a fundamental shift in their dynamic. I need time to think about it, she said finally. It's not a simple decision. Of course, Ashton agreed easily. Take all the time you need. The opportunity will remain open. As they left the restaurant, the night air crisp with approaching winter, Isolde found herself hyper-aware of Ashton's presence beside her, the slight brush of his hand against hers as he guided her to the waiting car, the subtle scent of his cologne, the protective way he positioned himself between her and the street. In the close confines of the car, these small details seemed magnified. Isolde found herself studying his profile in the passing streetlights, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows as he checked something on his phone, the unexpected vulnerability in his expression when he thought himself unobserved. This man, who had orchestrated her family's downfall with methodical precision, who had forced her into marriage as revenge for sins committed before she was even born, was the same man who had valued her professional input, who had offered to help her brother anonymously, who looked at her now with something that seemed dangerously close to genuine regard. How did one reconcile such contradictions? How did one navigate the murky waters between hatred and understanding, between resentment and attraction? Because attraction was there, Isolde realized with a jolt of clarity. Somewhere between their wedding night and this moment, her feelings toward Ashton had evolved from fear and resentment to something far more complicated. Respect, fascination, and yes, a physical awareness that could no longer be dismissed as simply Stockholm Syndrome. You're quiet, Ashton observed as the car approached their building. Having second thoughts about the job offer? Not exactly, Isolde replied, careful to keep her tone neutral. Just processing everything. Ashton studied her in the dimness of the car, his expression thoughtful. It's been an eventful few days. It has, she agreed, grateful for the understatement that allowed her to sidestep more personal reflections. In the elevator ascending to the penthouse, Isolde found herself acutely conscious of the small space, of Ashton's proximity, of the charged silence between them. When the doors opened onto their private foyer, she stepped out with relief, needing distance to clear her head. Thank you for dinner, she said, turning to face him with what she hoped was a casual smile. It was lovely. It was, Ashton agreed, his gray eyes intent on her face. Perhaps we could make it a regular occurrence. Without the business discussion next time. The implication was clear. He was suggesting something more personal, more like a real date than a work dinner. Isolde felt her pulse quicken at the possibility. I'd like that, she heard herself say, the words emerging before she could second-guess them. Something shifted in Ashton's expression, surprise, perhaps, at her ready agreement, followed by a warmth she had rarely seen from him. He took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the subtle notes of his cologne. Isolde, he began, his voice lower than usual, rougher. I know our beginning was unconventional, coerced, even. But these past weeks, seeing you with my team, watching how you've handled your father's illness, getting to know the person behind the name I've resented for so long. He paused, seeming to search for words, a rare occurrence for the usually articulate CEO. I find myself wanting something different from this marriage than what I initially intended. The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable in a way Isolde had never expected from Ashton Thorne. She should have been wary, should have questioned his motives. should have remembered the calculated revenge that had brought them together in the first place. Instead, she found herself responding to the genuine emotion in his voice, to the uncertainty in his expression, so at odds with his usual confidence. "What do you want, Ashton?" she asked softly. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "May I show you?" The question, a request for permission rather than a presumption of right, touched something deep within Isolde. In all their interactions, from that first confrontational meeting in his office to this moment, Ashton had never once violated her physical boundaries, never presumed intimacy was his due despite their legal status as husband and wife. Isolde nodded, a small, decisive movement. Ashton's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as he lowered his head to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. When Isolde didn't pull away, his other arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened. Heat bloomed between them, 3 months of denied attraction crystallizing into this moment of connection. Isolde's hands moved to Ashton's shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath expensive tailoring as she responded to his kiss with increasing fervor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Isolde found herself staring into Ashton's eyes, searching for, what? Triumph? Calculation? The cold satisfaction of a man who had finally claimed what he considered rightfully his? What she saw instead was wonder, desire, and something that looked remarkably like vulnerability, as though Ashton himself was surprised by the intensity of their connection. "I should," Isolde began, then faltered, uncertain what came next in this new, uncharted territory between them. "You should do whatever feels right to you," Ashton said quietly, releasing his hold on her waist though his eyes remained fixed on her face. "I meant what I said earlier, Isolde. I want something different from this marriage now. Something real. But only if you want it too." The choice, freely offered after months of coercion and control, was perhaps the most meaningful gift he could have given her. Isolde studied him, this complex man who had been both her captor and, increasingly, her ally. The man whose revenge had shattered her family, but whose unexpected kindnesses had begun to heal something within her. "I don't know what I want yet," she admitted finally. "But I think I'd like to find out." Something like hope flickered in Ashton's eyes. "Then we'll discover it together. At your pace, not mine." As Isolde prepared for bed that night, her lips still tingling from their kiss, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions, she found herself standing at a crossroads she had never anticipated. 3 months ago, she had entered this marriage as a sacrifice, a reluctant bride coerced by circumstance and family loyalty. Now, she was contemplating a real relationship with the man she had once viewed as her enemy. Was it Stockholm Syndrome? Pragmatic adaptation to her circumstances? Or was it possible that beneath the revenge and resentment, she and Ashton had found something genuine, a connection based on mutual respect, shared intelligence, and undeniable chemistry? As she drifted toward sleep, Isolde realized that for the first time since their wedding, she was looking forward to the morning, to seeing Ashton across the breakfast table, to continuing this tentative exploration of what might exist between them beyond the shadows of the past. If you've ever found yourself drawn to someone against all logic and better judgment, you understand the power of unexpected connections. Sometimes the heart recognizes possibilities that the mind resists acknowledging. The weeks that followed established a new pattern to their marriage, one characterized by cautious exploration rather than cold detachment. They began sharing meals more regularly, not just at home but at restaurants throughout the city, quiet, intimate establishments where they could talk without the pressure of public scrutiny. Ashton proved to be a surprisingly attentive companion, listening with genuine interest to Isolde's thoughts on everything from art to business ethics. He shared stories from his childhood, glimpses of the boy he had been before grief and revenge had hardened him, and asked questions about her past that suggested real curiosity rather than strategic information gathering. Physical intimacy developed gradually between them. The first kiss led to others, in the kitchen as they prepared dinner together, in the elevator returning from an evening out. Once, memorably, in Ashton's office when Isolde brought him lunch during a particularly stressful workday. Each encounter deepened their connection, building a foundation of trust and mutual desire that had been entirely absent from their arranged beginning. Yet they had not crossed the final boundary that would make their marriage complete in every sense. Ashton, true to his word, allowed Isolde to set the pace of their physical relationship, never pressuring her for more than she was ready to give. It was Isolde who finally made the decision, on a snowy evening in early December. They had been married for nearly 4 months, their relationship evolving from forced arrangement to something increasingly genuine. Her father had been released from the hospital 2 weeks earlier, recovering at home under Myra's watchful care. Liam had been accepted into the Northwestern treatment program, his expenses mysteriously covered by a newly established medical foundation with ties to anonymous tech industry donors. And Isolde had accepted Ashton's job offer, spending her days at Thorne Industries developing the framework for the new sustainability division. To her surprise and gratification, Ashton's executive team had quickly recognized her capabilities, treating her with professional respect rather than as the boss's trophy wife. That evening, they had attended a charity gala together, their first major public appearance since the wedding. Unlike that stiff, formal occasion, this event had found them genuinely enjoying each other's company, dancing together with an ease that belied their complicated history. "You're different tonight," Ashton observed as they swayed to the music, his hand warm against the small of her back. More relaxed. Isolde smiled up at him, no longer startled by how handsome she found him in formal attire. "I'm not pretending anymore," she admitted. "This feels real." Something flickered in Ashton's eyes. Hope, perhaps, or a deeper emotion he wasn't yet ready to name. "Does it?" "Yes," Isolde said simply, allowing herself to lean closer, her body fitting against his with surprising naturalness. "I never expected this, Ashton. To feel this way about you." His arm tightened around her waist. "How do you feel?" The direct question deserved an equally direct answer. "Like I want more than what we have now." Ashton's step faltered slightly, his eyes darkening as he absorbed her meaning. "Are you sure?" "I am," Isolde confirmed, surprised by her own certainty. "Tonight, when we get home." The remainder of the gala passed in a haze of anticipation, both of them going through the motions of social niceties while hyper-aware of the promise that hung between them. The car ride home was charged with tension, Ashton's hand entwined with hers, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm that sent shivers up her arm. In the penthouse elevator, he finally pulled her into his arms, kissing her with an intensity that left no doubt about his desire. "Last chance to change your mind," he murmured against her lips as the doors opened onto their private foyer. "I don't want to change my mind," Isolde assured him, leading him toward the bedroom they had nominally shared for months but had never truly occupied together. "I want you, Ashton. Tonight. Now." What followed was a revelation, not just of physical pleasure, though that was certainly part of it, but of emotional connection Isolde had never anticipated with the man who had once been her captor. Ashton was both passionate and tender, attentive to her needs, generous in ways that belied his ruthless business reputation. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, Isolde marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment, from forced marriage to genuine desire, from mutual resentment to something that felt dangerously close to love. "What are you thinking?" Ashton asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That this is not how I expected our story to unfold," Isolde admitted. "When you proposed, or rather, demanded, that I marry you, I never imagined we would end up here." Ashton was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful in the dim light. "I didn't either," he confessed. "You were meant to be a means to an end. The final piece in my revenge against your father. And now," Isolde prompted, needing to hear the words. "Now you're—" He hesitated, searching for the right expression. "Now you're the beginning of something, not the end. Something I never expected to find. Certainly never deserved to find." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep within Isolde. "We can't change how we began, Ashton, but perhaps we can choose how we continue." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I would like that very much." As winter deepened toward the holidays, their relationship continued to evolve, each day bringing new discoveries about each other, new layers of connection. They worked well together professionally, Isolde's innovative approaches complementing Ashton's strategic mind as they developed the sustainability division. At home, they established routines that reflected genuine partnership rather than convenience, cooking together in the evenings, discussing their days, sharing both challenges and triumphs. Physical intimacy became a regular, joyful aspect of their marriage, their initial hesitancy giving way to passionate exploration and deepening emotional connection. For the first time since their wedding, Isolde found herself truly feeling like Ashton's wife rather than his reluctant bride. Yet shadows from the past still lingered. Chief among these was the unresolved situation with her father, the man whose negligence had set this entire chain of events in motion, whose actions had cost 11 lives including Ashton's sister, but who was also the father Isolde loved despite his flaws. The issue came to a head in early January, as they prepared to attend a retirement dinner for one of Thorn Industries' founding board members. Isolde was fastening a diamond necklace, a Christmas gift from Ashton. When she caught him watching her in the mirror, his expression troubled. "What is it?" she asked, turning to face him. Ashton hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've been considering for some time." The serious tone immediately put Isolde on alert. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous," Ashton corrected, guiding her to sit beside him on the edge of the bed. "But significant. It concerns your father." Isolde tensed, old fears resurfacing despite the trust they had built. "What about him?" Ashton took her hand, his touch gentle, but his expression resolute. "I'm going to release the evidence. All of it. The documents proving his negligence, the falsified maintenance records, the internal memos warning of potential equipment failures. Everything." The announcement hit Isolde like a physical blow. "Why? Why now after all this time? Haven't you taken enough from him? His company, his health, his daughter?" "This isn't about taking," Ashton said quietly. "It's about truth. About justice for the 11 people who died, including Eliza. Their families deserve to know what really happened, even after 15 years. "It will destroy him," Isolde protested. "He's still recovering from a heart attack, Ashton. This could kill him." "I don't believe it will," Ashton countered, his tone gentle but firm. "Your father is stronger than you give him credit for. And carrying this secret, this guilt, for 15 years has been its own kind of prison for him." Isolde pulled her hand away, rising to pace the room as she struggled with conflicting loyalties. "And what about us? What happens to our marriage when you publicly destroy my father's reputation? When you expose him as responsible for 11 deaths? How do we move forward from that?" Ashton watched her, his expression calm despite the emotional charge of their discussion. "That's why I'm telling you first, Isolde. I want your input, your perspective. I won't do this without considering the impact on you, on us." The concession, so different from the unilateral decisions that had characterized their early relationship, gave Isolde pause. "You would consider not releasing the evidence?" "For me, I would consider alternative approaches," Ashton clarified. "Ways to ensure justice and closure for the victims' families without unnecessarily destroying your father in the process." Isolde studied him, searching for the calculated revenge seeker she had first encountered. Instead, she found a man genuinely wrestling with competing values: justice for his sister and the other victims, compassion for the woman he had come to care for deeply, a desire to finally end the cycle of retribution that had defined so much of his adult life. "What if," she began hesitantly, an idea taking shape. "What if my father came forward himself, acknowledged his role publicly, apologized to the families, perhaps established a memorial fund for the victims?" Ashton considered this, his expression thoughtful. Voluntary accountability rather than forced exposure. "Yes," Isolde nodded, warming to the concept. "It would still be difficult for him, still have significant consequences, but it would allow him some dignity, some agency in the process." "Do you believe he would do it?" Ashton asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "Admit his culpability after denying it for 15 years? Isolde thought of her father's expression in the hospital when he had acknowledged his guilt to her. The shame, the regret, but also the relief of finally speaking the truth. "I think he might, if approached the right way, if given the chance to do the right thing, finally." Ashton rose, moving to stand before her. He took her hands in his gray eyes serious as they held her gaze. "If you believe this is possible, I'm willing to try your approach first. But Isolde, one way or another, the truth needs to come out. For Eliza, for all of them." The concession, the willingness to consider an alternative to his long-planned exposure, moved Isolde deeply. This was not the implacable avenger who had forced her into marriage months ago, but a man capable of growth, of compromise, of considering perspectives beyond his own pain. "Thank you," she said softly, stepping closer to rest her forehead against his chest. "For trusting me with this. For being willing to find another way." Ashton's arms came around her, holding her close. "You've changed me, Isolde," he admitted, his voice low against her hair. "In ways I never expected, never thought possible." The simple acknowledgement, so honest and vulnerable from a man who had spent years building walls around his emotions, brought tears to Isolde's eyes. "You've changed me too," she whispered. "I never imagined I could feel this way about you. Not after how we began." Ashton tipped her face up to his, brushing away a tear with his thumb. "How do you feel?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities. Isolde studied his face. The strong features that had once seemed cold and forbidding now familiar and dear. The gray eyes that could still pierce with intensity, but now also softened when they looked at her. "I love you," she said simply, the truth of it surprising even her. "Despite everything. Because of everything. I love you, Ashton." Something transformed in his expression, wonder, joy, and a vulnerability she had rarely seen from him. "Isolde," he breathed, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you too. More than I ever thought possible. More than I deserve." Their kiss was tender, a sealing of promises, a bridge between their troubled past and the future they were choosing to build together. The retirement dinner was forgotten as they lost themselves in each other, their lovemaking that night different from any they had shared before, deeper, more meaningful, a true union of bodies and hearts. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Ashton's hand drifted to Isolde's abdomen, his touch gentle. "Have you considered," he asked softly, "that tonight might have consequences beyond the immediate?" Isolde covered his hand with hers, understanding his meaning immediately. "Children, you mean?" "Yes," Ashton confirmed. "A family of our own. Something I never thought I wanted until you." The idea sent a wave of emotion through Isolde. Fear, excitement, longing all mingled together. "I've thought about it," she admitted. "Especially lately. The possibility of creating something good from our complicated beginning. A new generation," Ashton mused. "One not burdened by the mistakes and resentments of the past." "Would you want that?" Isolde asked, turning to see his face in the dim light. "A child? With me?" Ashton's expression softened with a tenderness few would have believed the ruthless so capable of. "More than anything," he said simply. "When you're ready. If you're ready." They fell asleep that night wrapped in each other's arms, the possibility of new life hovering between them like a promise, not just a biological continuation, but a symbolic one. A child who would represent not revenge or obligation, but love freely given and received. If you believe that even the most difficult beginnings can lead to beautiful outcomes, share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that transformation is always possible, that hearts can heal, and that love sometimes finds us in the most unexpected circumstances. 3 months later, on a bright spring morning, Isolde stood in the bathroom of their penthouse, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her hand. Emotions cascaded through her: joy, fear, wonder, disbelief. A baby. Their baby. A new life created from what had begun as revenge but had transformed, against all odds, into genuine love. She found Ashton in his home office, focused on his laptop screen. For a moment, she simply watched him, this complex man who had entered her life as an adversary and become her partner in every sense of the word. The past 6 months had continued their evolution as a couple, their relationship deepening as they worked together both professionally and personally. Her father, with Isolde's encouragement, had indeed come forward publicly about his role in the accident 15 years earlier. The disclosure had been painful but ultimately healing. For the victims' families who finally received confirmation of what they had long suspected, for Richard Winters who no longer carried the weight of deception, and for Ashton, who found that justice brought more peace than revenge ever had. "Ashton," Isolde said softly from the doorway. He looked up immediately, his expression warming at the sight of her. "Good morning. I thought you were still asleep." Isolde moved into the room, her heart pounding as she held out the pregnancy test. "I have something to show you." Ashton's gaze dropped to the test, then back to her face, comprehension dawning in his eyes. "Isolde," he breathed, rising from his chair. "Are you?" "Yes," she confirmed, a smile breaking through her nervousness. "We're going to have a baby." In 3 strides, Ashton crossed the room and gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an uncharacteristic display of spontaneous joy. When he set her down, his hands cradled her face with infinite tenderness, his eyes suspiciously bright. "A baby," he repeated, wonder evident in his voice. "Our child. Are you happy?" Isolde asked, though his reaction left little doubt. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Ashton replied, one hand moving to rest gently on her still flat abdomen. "Grateful, amazed, terrified, all of those and more." Isolde covered his hand with hers, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "I never imagined, when you forced me to marry you, that we would end up here, that we could create something so beautiful from such a difficult beginning." "Nor did I," Ashton admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "You were meant to be my revenge, Isolde. Instead, you became my redemption." 9 months later, on a snowy December evening, Eliza Grace Thorne entered the world, a perfect blend of her parents with Ashton's gray eyes and Isolde's olive complexion. As Ashton held his daughter for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, Isolde watched the final transformation of the man she had once feared and now loved beyond measure. "She's perfect," he whispered, carefully cradling the tiny bundle against his chest. "Absolutely perfect." "She is," Isolde agreed, exhausted but radiant with joy. "Our miracle." Ashton leaned down to kiss his wife, his expression more open and vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "Thank you," he said softly, "for our daughter, for forgiving me, for loving me despite how we began." "Perhaps not despite it," Isolde corrected gently, "but because of it. Our beginning shaped us, Ashton, brought us to this moment." To her. As little Eliza's tiny hand wrapped around her father's finger, Isolde reflected on the strange, painful, beautiful journey that had led them here, from forced marriage to true partnership, from revenge to redemption, from strangers to family. Some might call it Stockholm Syndrome. Others might say it was simply the alchemy of time and proximity. But Isolde knew the truth was both simpler and more complex, that love sometimes finds us in the most unexpected circumstances, that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds, and that even the most difficult beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings. Or rather, she thought, watching her husband whisper promises to their newborn daughter, the most beautiful new beginnings. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth for more powerful stories about love, redemption, and the healing power of forgiveness. And remember, sometimes what begins as our greatest challenge becomes our greatest blessing.